Cap says with shades on that Claressa, the woman he calls his queen, is the best thing that has ever happened to him in his nearly 50 years on this earth, and I need every single one of you to sit with that sentence for a second before we go anywhere else, because that is not a small statement, that is not a throwaway line, that is a man who has a wife, who has a whole family, who has decades of a public marriage that we all watched him build brick by brick, standing in front of a camera, with sunglasses covering his eyes, telling the world that the mistress is the miracle. And I want you to notice something before we even get 1 inch deeper into this, because the tell is already in the tape. He did not say it once. He said it, and then he corrected himself, and then he said it again with a softer version, and then he paused, and then he had to reach for the adjectives like a man who forgot his own script backstage. Very beautiful. Very outgoing. Smart. Come on. You know what I mean. People don't know. That is not a man in love. That is a man reading a cue card through tinted lenses because the direct deposit depends on it. And what makes this moment so wild, what makes this moment so unavoidable, is that this is not a new relationship, this is not a fresh discovery, this is not some brand new couple that just fell out of the sky in the last 30 days. This is a situation that has been playing out in public for over 2 years, and yet the podcast circuit keeps framing it like it is a beautiful new love story that just walked in the door. Everything you thought this interview was going to be was framed around the wrong question. The right question is not how he feels about her. The right question is why he is only allowed to feel this way about her when the cameras are rolling and the shades are on. And when we get to the part where I break down the actual business structure behind the so-called love story, and I promise you we are getting there, you are going to understand why every word out of that man's mouth in that clip was never really his to say in the first place. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me set the table properly, because there are people who are going to stumble into this video without the full picture, and I refuse to leave anybody behind. The situation we are unpacking today involves 3 main characters, and if you are going to follow the story you have to understand where each of them stands. You have Claressa Shields, the boxing champion, the woman who has called herself the greatest woman of all time in the sport, the athlete who has built a genuine resume in the ring and who, love her or not, has the receipts inside her actual profession. Then you have Papoose'S, the rapper, the man who has been famous in hip-hop circles for about 2 decades, largely for being a lyrical technician on mixtapes, largely for being married to Remy Ma, and lately, most prominently, for being the man photographed on the arm of Claressa Shields at every red carpet, every ringside seat, every award show where a camera might be pointed. And then you have Remy Ma, the actual rapper in that marriage, the actual chart presence, the actual name that carries weight in the industry, the woman who has been legally married to Papoose'S for years and who, as of the latest publicly reported information, has not signed off on any finalized divorce. Those are your 3 points of the triangle, and every single dynamic in the story flows out of the tension between them. Now here is what has been happening, because context matters. For more than 2 years, Papoose'S and Claressa have been showing up in public together, at the BET Awards, on The Breakfast Club, at ringside for her fights, in Instagram posts, in fan pages that some people believe are being run by Claressa herself. And for that entire 2-year stretch, the marriage to Remy Ma has been hovering over the whole situation like a storm cloud that will not move. Reports have circulated about a divorce filing, but as of what has been publicly documented, there is no finalized divorce decree, there is no clean legal separation, there is no closed chapter, there is a piece of paper somewhere in the system and a whole lot of public performance around it. The stakes here are not just gossip. The stakes are reputation, because Claressa is trying to build a legacy as the face of women's boxing, and she is doing it while attached to a public entanglement that keeps overshadowing her actual accomplishments. The stakes are financial, because when Papoose'S speaks in these interviews, he is speaking as a man whose public relevance right now is almost entirely tied to being seen with her. The stakes are cultural, because hip-hop and boxing are 2 spaces that watch this kind of story like a hawk and remember every misstep. And the stakes are personal, because there are children involved, there is a wife who has not yet been legally released, and there is a woman on the other side of this triangle who keeps insisting that the love is real even as the evidence keeps saying the love is scripted. So the question that everything else in this video is going to answer is simple. If this is really the best thing that has ever happened to him, why does he only seem able to say so when he is being paid to promote her, and why does the phrasing keep changing every time he opens his mouth? Let us walk through what we can actually see with our own eyes, because before we get to the deeper layers of this story we have to lock in the surface evidence, and the surface evidence alone is already damning. Piece number 1 is the clip itself, the moment that kicked this entire conversation off, where Papoose'S is sitting on a podcast, reportedly with the Danza Project in a segment that has been circulating heavily on Instagram and TikTok, and he is asked directly how he is handling the new relationship and all the noise around it. And instead of answering the actual question about the scrutiny, the rumor mill, the way Claressa is getting dragged through the internet every day, he pivots straight into a pre-packaged compliment about her being the best thing that ever happened to him. He does not engage with the difficulty of the moment. He does not defend her against the specific criticisms. He performs. And the performance is happening with sunglasses on indoors, which is a detail I keep coming back to, Because when a man cannot let you see his eyes while he is telling you he is in love, the eyes are telling you a different story than the mouth. Piece number 2 is the correction inside the same clip. He says Claressa is the best thing that ever happened to him. Full stop. Definitive. Then he immediately walks it back and says she is one of the best things that ever happened to him. That is not a stumble. That is a man remembering, in real time, that he has children, that he has a career that predates her, that he has a wife whose name is still legally attached to his, and that the internet is going to clip whatever he says. The walk back is the tell. Piece number 3 is the pause. Watch the clip yourself. After he says very beautiful, very outgoing, there is a beat, a genuine hesitation, before he reaches for smart. That pause is not thoughtful reflection. That pause is a man scanning his own script for the next line because the emotion is not driving the sentence, the assignment is. And piece number 4 is the pattern across interviews, because this is not the only place he has said something like this. He said essentially the same phrasing on The Breakfast Club, in an interview that has been widely circulated, where he called her his new queen and said she was one of the best things that ever happened to him. He has said it in the reported Vlad TV sit-down, where he was asked about the relationship, about Remy, about the accusations that he is being used or using her, and again the answer came out polished, rehearsed, and safely on message. When a man says the same 3 sentences in 5 different rooms, that is not love, that is media training. And here is what I want you to sit with before we move on. Every single one of these pieces of surface evidence points to the same conclusion, and each one is more revealing than the last. The clip is the setup. The correction is the crack. The pause is the confirmation. The pattern across every podcast is the proof. This is a script. This is a rollout. This is a man who is performing a relationship on camera because the relationship, in its current form, only functions if the performance keeps working. And I have not even gotten to the good part yet. And oh, do I have more for you. The fans who keep insisting this is real love, the ones who slide into every comment section defending the entanglement, the ones who keep saying that we just do not understand black love. I am telling you right now, sit down, buckle in, because the next layer of this is where the whole picture starts to fall apart. Because the surface stuff, the clips, the phrasing, the shades, that is just what everybody can see. What is coming next is what people close to this situation have been quietly saying for months, and once you hear it laid out in order, you are not going to be able to unsee it. Stay with me. Layer 2 is where it stops being about what he said on a podcast and starts being about what everybody around him has been telegraphing for a very long time. Start with Remy Ma, because you cannot talk about this story without her, and the way she has moved throughout this entire situation has said more than any interview Papoose'S has ever given. According to widely reported coverage, including outlets like The Shade Room and Vibe, Remy has addressed the split publicly, has spoken about waiting for the divorce to be finalized, has appeared on live streams where she has been notably calm, notably composed, notably unbothered, and calm is the loudest sound a scorned woman can make. When a woman who built her entire public persona around loyalty to a marriage responds to that marriage ending with quiet confidence instead of chaos, it means she knows something the audience does not. That is cultural evidence piece number 1, and it is louder than anything Papoose'S has said in any interview. Piece number 2 is the reported reaction from figures inside the boxing community, specifically the ongoing back and forth involving Laila Ali, the daughter of Muhammad Ali, a woman who has quietly celebrated nearly 2 decades of marriage while Claressa is out here defending an entanglement. The contrast is not accidental. The contrast is the whole point. One woman is the model of what stability in this space actually looks like. The other is the cautionary tale being written in real time in front of us. Piece number 3 is the way other rappers, other artists, other people in the culture have gone conspicuously silent about this relationship. Nobody with real weight in hip-hop is co-signing this pairing publicly. Nobody is showing up as the couple's champion. Nobody is going on record to say these two belong together. In a genre where cosigns are currency, the absence of a cosign is a statement. Piece number 4 is the fan community itself, because if you scroll through the comments on any post involving these two, the sentiment has shifted hard over the last several months. It used to be a mix. Now it is overwhelmingly people asking the same questions I am asking. Where is the divorce? Where is the accountability? Where is the actual love, not the performance of love? And when the culture itself starts asking the same questions in unison, you are watching a narrative collapse in slow motion. Now I want to be fair for a second, because there is a counterargument here, and I want to acknowledge it before I dismantle it. The counterargument is that people fall in love in complicated situations, that marriages end for real reasons, that Claressa deserves happiness like anybody else, and that we as outsiders do not have the right to judge what is happening inside their private lives. And I hear that. I genuinely hear that. But here is why it does not hold. Because this is not a private relationship. This is a relationship being sold to us in public, on podcast after podcast, on red carpet after red carpet, at fight after fight, with a very specific narrative attached to it. The moment you monetize the story, the moment you use the story to build a public brand, the moment you sit down with Vlad and the Breakfast Club and the Danza Project to sell the story back to us, the story becomes ours to analyze. That is the deal. You cannot ask the audience to root for the love, and then tell the audience they are not allowed to ask questions about the love. And once you accept that this relationship is functionally a public product, the cultural evidence tells you everything you need to know. The wife is calm. The industry is silent. The peers are watching. The fans are turning. And the man at the center of it is still doing interviews with his eyes hidden. This is not a love story. This is a rollout. And now we have to talk about what a rollout actually is, because up until this point we've been talking about what is happening on the surface and what is happening in the culture, but the real story, the one that nobody in these podcast rooms wants to touch, is the story of the machine underneath. Here is where we shift gears, because everything we have talked about so far has been about words, clips, reactions, feelings. Now we are going to talk about mechanics. Because what is actually happening between Papoose and Claressa is not a romance being covered by the media. It is a media strategy being covered as a romance. And once you understand the mechanics, you cannot go back to seeing it any other way. Angle number 1 is the relevance economy. Papoose, respectfully, is not a chart-driving artist in 2026. He has never had a major commercial hit at scale. His name has always been more critically respected than commercially dominant. His main visibility for years came from being married to Remy Ma, a bona fide rap star whose commercial success made her the household name in the household. When you take away the marriage, when you take away the association with a top-tier rapper, what is left for Papoose in the mainstream conversation? Reportedly a Sirius XM slot with Rock the Bells, some podcast appearances, and now, most importantly, a very public relationship with a very famous athlete. That is not an insult. That is a structural reality. His current relevance is downstream of Claressa's fame in a way that his previous relevance was downstream of Remy's fame. Same pattern, different woman. And that pattern is not love. That pattern is a survival strategy that dresses itself up as love, because love is the only version of the story the audience will accept. Angle number 2 is the promotional apparatus around a boxer. Boxing is a sport that lives and dies on pay-per-view, on storyline, on the ability to sell tickets and streams. Every fighter, especially at the top of the food chain, needs a narrative that keeps them in the news between fights. Claressa has always been an incredible technical fighter, but her promotional presence in the mainstream has historically been shakier than her in-ring dominance. She has struggled to get the pay-per-view numbers her skills deserve. She has struggled to get the mainstream press coverage the men in the sport get for less. And the moment she attaches herself to a hip-hop figure, especially one with existing media relationships, her promotional footprint expands overnight. Suddenly she is on the Breakfast Club not just as a boxer, but as one half of a couple. Suddenly she is at the BET Awards not just as an athlete, but as a cultural fixture. Suddenly the podcasts that would never have booked her solo are booking her with Papoose. The relationship is a distribution channel. And a distribution channel is worth paying to maintain. Angle number 3 is where the two angles meet, and this is the piece that reframes the entire story. When you have one person whose relevance is fading and another person whose promotional footprint needs expansion, you have the exact business conditions under which a public relationship becomes a mutually beneficial arrangement. He gets the visibility. She gets the reach. The podcasts get the clicks. The narrative sells itself. And the only thing that has to be maintained is the appearance of love, which requires exactly what we saw in that clip. A man in shade saying the right words in the right order to keep the machine running. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is how public-facing relationships in the entertainment industry have worked for 100 years. And once you see the mechanics, every strange thing about this situation makes sense. The 2-year timeline of a divorce that will not finalize makes sense, because a finalized divorce would remove the tension that keeps the story in the news. The refusal to answer direct questions about scrutiny makes sense, because engaging with scrutiny would break the fourth wall of the performance. The sunglasses indoors make sense, because eyes are the one thing that cannot lie on camera. The interchangeable phrasing across every interview makes sense, because interchangeable phrasing is the signature of a talking point, not a feeling. And the pause before the word smart makes sense, because in the millisecond of that pause, the machine had to remember what the script said. This is not about whether they like each other. They may genuinely enjoy each other's company. That is not the question. The question is whether what is being sold to the public as a love story is actually a love story, or whether it is a business arrangement wearing love as a costume. And when you line up the evidence, the fading relevance, the promotional utility, the 2-year stall on the divorce, the identical phrasing across every podcast, the refusal to make it official, the wife's suspicious calm, the answer is not ambiguous. It is right there in front of you. It has been there the whole time. And here is the truth bomb I have been building toward, The one I want everybody to sit with before they scroll away, because this is the part that changes how you watch every future interview these two do. What we are witnessing between Papoose'S and Claressa Shields is not a relationship. Allegedly, based on the pattern of evidence, based on the reported timeline, based on the way every public appearance is structured, based on the way the money and the visibility flow, what we are witnessing is a co-marketed public partnership that has been dressed up as a romance because a romance is more clickable than a partnership. And the reason this matters, the reason I am spending 21 minutes of your life laying this out, is because if I am right, and I am telling you the evidence says I am, then everything Claressa has said publicly about defending this man is not her defending love. It is her defending the arrangement. And that is a devastating thing to have to say out loud, because Claressa deserves better than to be the woman in this equation. She is the champion. She is the one with the receipts. She is the one whose actual career built the platform they are now standing on together. And what she is getting in return, based on the publicly available evidence, is a man who cannot even answer a simple podcast question about how much he loves her without hiding his eyes and hitting the exact same 3 talking points he hit on the last 5 podcasts. Allegedly. Reportedly. Based on the pattern. The consequences of this are not small either. For Papoose'S, the consequence is that when this arrangement ends, and every arrangement like this ends, that is the one guarantee in the entertainment industry, he will be right back where he started, without the wife whose commercial success made him famous the first time, and without the girlfriend whose athletic fame made him famous the second time. For Claressa, the consequence is that her actual legacy in boxing, a legacy she has spent her entire life building, will be forever entangled with a 2-year public embarrassment that the internet will never let her forget. For Remy Ma, the consequence is that she has already extracted herself from the equation in the smartest way possible, quietly, calmly, publicly, on her own terms. And for the culture, the consequence is that we now have a documented case study of what it looks like when a public relationship is used as a promotional vehicle, and we can use this case study to spot the next one faster. That is the reveal. That is what everything else has been pointing to. This is not love. This is a rollout. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now here is where the story turns, because as much as this video has been about exposing the mechanics of the arrangement, it is also about pointing to the person who is actually winning through all of this, and that person is Remy Ma. Look at what she has done. Look at how she has moved. In a situation designed to embarrass her, to force her to react, to make her the loud, angry wife in a public triangle, she has instead built the calmest, most self-respecting exit anybody in her position has ever run. She has kept working. She has kept her name in the culture on her own terms. She has appeared in her own interviews, on her own platforms, and every time she has been asked about this situation, she has answered with the poise of somebody who understands that her legacy is not defined by the man who tried to make her look small. And the numbers agree with her. She is still the rapper in that household. She is still the one whose commercial catalog holds weight. She is still the name that gets booked. She is still the woman that peers respect. And she is doing all of that without the daily podcast tour, without the constant red carpet appearances, without the sunglasses indoors, without the recycled talking points. She is winning by not playing. That is the lesson. One person makes music that requires a full media apparatus to justify its own existence. The other one makes music that speaks for itself and lets the woman go about her business. One person had to build a public relationship to stay in the news. The other one built a career so solid that walking away from the drama did not cost her a single ounce of relevance. And the beautiful thing about how this is unfolding is that the culture is picking up on it in real time. Every time Papoose'S sits down on another podcast and hits the same 3 talking points, more people notice. Every time Claressa posts another heart eye emoji in the comments of the arrangement, more people ask the questions we are asking today. Every time Remy stays quiet and lets the machine expose itself, more people give her the credit she is due. The right person is winning. Not loud. Not messy. Not through interviews and press cycles. Just through the slow, undeniable accumulation of dignity. And that is the ending that this story was always going to have, because the truth about entertainment industry arrangements is that they cannot outrun the people who choose not to compete with them. Remy did not have to say a word today. She did not have to react to the podcast clip. She did not have to defend her marriage on Instagram Live. She just had to let the man in the sunglasses keep talking, because the man in the sunglasses is doing her job for her every single time he opens his mouth. So if you came into this video worried about how she was handling all of this, do not be. She is fine. She has always been fine. She will keep being fine. And when the smoke clears from this whole situation, she will still be the rapper in that story. She will still be the mother in that story. She will still be the woman in that story who understood, before anybody else did, that the fastest way to expose a performance is to refuse to be a part of it. But do not get comfortable, because this is not the end of the story. This is the middle of the story pretending to be the end. There are at least 2 developments coming down the pipe that everybody who is following this needs to be watching for, and I'm going to be here to break down every single one of them the moment they land. Development number 1 is the divorce itself. As of the latest publicly reported information, there is no finalized decree, there are no active docketed hearings that have been made public, and there is a whole lot of talk without a whole lot of paperwork to match it. The moment that changes, and it will change one way or the other, because these things always resolve eventually, the entire dynamic of this triangle shifts overnight. If it finalizes, we find out very quickly whether the arrangement between Papoose and Claressa can survive without the tension of the unresolved marriage keeping it in the news. If it stalls further, we find out very quickly what Remy actually wants out of this situation, because the longer she waits, the more it starts to look like she is waiting for a specific moment on purpose. Development number 2 is Claressa's next fight and the promotional cycle around it. Because if my read on this whole thing is right, and if this relationship is functioning as a promotional apparatus, then the run-up to her next major fight is going to look exactly like a rollout. Coordinated podcast appearances, coordinated red carpet moments, coordinated Instagram content, all building toward the fight and all using the relationship as a distribution channel. Watch for it. Track it. Screenshot it. Because if the pattern holds, we are going to have receipts that make everything I said in this video look like the appetizer. And if you want to make sure you do not miss any of it, make sure you are subscribed, because the moment any of this breaks, I am here, I am watching, and I am not going to pretend the sunglasses are not on. And speaking of things you cannot afford to miss, the next video I have coming for you is going to blow this one out of the water. I am breaking down the full timeline of the reported Papoose'S and Remy Ma divorce filing, dating all the way back to the first public reports, walking through every document that has been made publicly available, every live stream where Remy has addressed the situation directly, and every strange gap in the paperwork that suggests this so-called divorce is being managed for maximum publicity rather than finalized for actual freedom. If you thought the podcast clip was revealing, wait until you see the paperwork trail. There is a specific pattern in the timeline that nobody has connected yet, and once I lay it out for you, the whole story we just walked through today is going to look like the surface of something much bigger. Click that video the moment this one ends. Do not scroll. Do not get distracted. Do not let the algorithm pull you into something else. Come straight there, because we are just getting started, and the man in the shades has a whole lot more explaining to do.